So let me introduce our speaker for tonight, Ted. Now, is it Boettner?
Got it.
Oh, yay!
Yay.
Ted Boettner is from the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy, which is a policy research organization that is nonpartisan, nonprofit, and statewide. And the center's research and analysis is designed to support informed public dialogue and policy in West Virginia. The center participates in a national network of similar organizations that already exist in over half the states. Ted, may I call you Ted?
Absolutely.
Ted is co-founder and executive director of the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy, located in Charleston, West Virginia. And we're so happy you came to this side of the state to help us understand our state's future. Ted holds a bachelor's degree in journalism from West Virginia University and a master's in political science. The West Virginia State Journal has named Ted one of the most influential business leaders in the state. We are pleased to welcome Ted as our speaker tonight and to hear his vision for a prosperous West Virginia where everyone has a meaningful and equitable opportunity to thrive. Ted.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. I don't have to do that. All right. Well, at the center, we do a lot of work in different buckets, sort of. We do a lot. Our bread and butter stuff is our tax and budget work that we do. But we do a lot of economics. We do a lot of economic development work, like tax subsidies. Rockwool, remember all the tax subsidies? We do work on stuff like that to make those transparent and accountable. Stuff like that. We do a whole host of things, like we work on family safety net stuff. But in West Virginia, we do a lot of energy economics too. We put out a report 6 months ago. One thing that's very unfortunate over the last couple of years is people don't care about reports anymore. And evidence and research doesn't have the sway it used to have in terms of policy making. Not that it had a huge sway a lot of times, but we're definitely finding over the last couple of years it's very difficult to advance policy based on evidence. So. People might be familiar with that already, but that's our bread and butter. That's what we do. We go with the evidence. When the evidence changes, and we change our mind. You know, that's how we look at data and research. And sometimes we don't know what all the evidence is, but a lot of times, a lot of things are studied really well. We have a good idea, and that's our goal: is to solve problems here in West Virginia. We have a lot of them. So what I thought I'd first talk about, people are probably pretty much know all of these things, but you know, when you look at West Virginia, especially compared to other states, a brief look at our economy, it's not very good. We're a low income, high poverty state, 49th in per capita income, 50th in median household income, and median is that distribution right in the middle. So think of the middle of the road. People right in the middle, right smack in the middle of the distribution. So we're last. We have the 4th highest poverty rate, and we have the highest share of government transfers. As a share of our personal income, almost 30% of our income in West Virginia is transfers. We also have a declining and aging population, which we'll talk about a little bit, low population density, and we also have a shrinking labor force, which is a big problem. We have no cities above 50,000. I think that's one of our biggest issues in West Virginia too. And if you look at other states that are more rural, that don't have metropolitan areas, that's where all the growth has been over the last couple of decades, is in those metropolitan areas, and we don't have any. Low economic diversity, people talk about this all the time. We've done a lot of research on ourselves. We're 46, so we have a very undiverse economy, very heavy into the mining sector, and especially the healthcare sector. Low wages, education, and participation. This shouldn't be something anybody doesn't already know, but we are 47th in median wages, so our wages are 47th lowest, and we have the lowest share of adults with a college degree. And we're 50th in labor force participation. Only 53.8% of our civilian, non-institutionalized labor force population is in the labor force. Health, too, we're 49th in life expectancy, 74.8. Now, if you're McDowell County, that's closer to 60. 46th in overall health outcomes, and we're first in opioid-related deaths. People know about that. But it's not a very good picture. I mean, if you want to look at us relative to other states, Now, there are good things about West Virginia. Obviously, we all live here. There's things that we enjoy, especially as I got back from DC. I really hate being around all that traffic. It's so weird to be around all that money. I'm like, wow. I'm kind of glad I'm not around it some ways, but it's like, it just blows me away how wealthy other places are. I mean, good thing about West Virginia, it's a cheap place to live. If you look at where $1 takes you in West Virginia, it takes you fourth. So it's one of the cheapest places to live when we look at what do we get for $100. And that is a good part of living in West Virginia. Also, traffic, lots of amenities, outdoors, lots of things like that. I don't want to be totally doom and gloom here. But those are like sort of the bigger issues. So this chart right here, I always say this is the chart to end all charts. When we look at our problems in society, economically, socially, name it. It doesn't matter if it's the opioid crisis, teen pregnancy, people going to prison, you name the issue, it comes back to this chart where we've seen productivity, this is how much we produce per hour of work, go up, and wages and compensation have gone down. So productivity's gone up 50% since 1979, and wages and compensation, healthcare, only 3.6. If we just look at wages, it's actually gone down, just wages. But I always say that is the chart. When people say like people have economic anxiety or why people voted a certain way in rural areas, this is the heart of it. People's wages have declined for the majority of the population over the last 40 years. That's a huge issue. And it's also one of the main issues in some of these horrible outcomes that we're seeing. But those are some of the big issues. But if you go back into the 70s, so if you go in the early 70s, if you look right down there, productivity and growth grew at the same rate. We only have data for West Virginia going back to 74. But this looks at four-person median income and per capita income growth. So that's per capita income growth, and that's the growth of the typical family, four-person family. So income has grown 91% over this period, but median household income, the typical family, only 30%. If those would have grown together, this income of $73,000 in 2007 for a four-person family would be $107,000. Just to give you an idea of like what we're talking about when we say like wages haven't kept up with inflation, wages haven't kept up with productivity, how much we're producing every day. And the sad part is we're working longer hours than we used to, about over 20% more than we did back in the 70s. So these are huge issues. When your wages don't keep up with your productivity, this is when you have these huge issues. So these are some of just the huge things going on. One thing that we like to talk about too, people in West Virginia, we often talk about how undiverse our economy is, how it's being driven by coal and gas. And that is still true today. So we rank in the top 10 states of share of mining GDP as a share of our economy. But one of the real reasons historically too has been that over-concentration. And it's what some economists call a resource curse. When you concentrate in extractive industries, what happens is you do not encourage the specialization trap. You have resource abundance and you have a low-skill, high-wage jobs. But then the incentive is don't go to college, don't do those things, because you can then you end up with an undiverse economy, then you have an innovation gap, you have a lack of competitive capital and poor economic growth. So basically what we're saying is when you concentrate in extractive industries, you end up, over the long term, what's called the resource curse is you have slower growth and you have slower economic performance in other states that have a more diverse economy. Like very few states want to trade places with economies that get into extractive industry. Massachusetts doesn't want to be West Virginia, and California doesn't want to be Wyoming. They don't want to concentrate in natural resource extraction because it leads to pretty bad outcomes. But this is the story of West Virginia. The last it's the whole story of our state. Couple of things that, because of that really are driving our economy right now has been the big shale boom. So if you look down here, this is where gas production was. This is gross withdrawals, and this is shale. This is right when it started. So we were only producing about 200 billion cubic feet of gas. Now it's 1.8 trillion. Okay, 84% of that in 2017 was shale gas. So it used to be all conventional. But one thing we're seeing with the budget, these are gas prices here. So the last two months in West Virginia, we've seen revenues down. And one of the main reasons is gas prices are down. Production up, gas prices up. These usually don't happen together either. Usually you don't see huge amounts of production when prices are going down. Usually they end up equaling out, supply and demand. But we're not seeing that. And they're overproducing gas. We just did a report on this in January. It's leading to they're in red ink too. We can talk about that later. But this is a major factor in West Virginia's economy. Without this, our state would probably be in a pretty big pickle in terms of its budget. But at the same time, one of the things that the gas boom has done is caused our coal to decline. It's one of the top reasons. One of the bigger reasons is thinner seams. We're not as productive as we used to be, so Illinois started producing more coal, Wyoming did. You can see right here, this looks at 1 million short tons of coal, how much they've gone down. This one looks at southern West Virginia and northern West Virginia. You actually see northern West Virginia has actually increased a little bit, but southern West Virginia has declined. But if you look over the last 2 years, so this, when we talk about this economic boom that's happening, that's the boom right there. We went from there to there, okay? And most of that is metallurgical coal, which, let's go look at the prices of metallurgical coal have gone up. It was $84 a ton, now it's $145. And they just got a tax break. Talk about that later if you want to. But that has helped revenue over the last 2 years. The fact that met coal prices are up and the fact that coal production's up just a little bit. But this is the Trump coal boom right there. So people talk about that. That's actually what happened. So it has gone up a little bit, but not enough to really make a huge difference. And it's probably going to continue to go down in the future. One of these charts I thought was really fascinating. I'm not sure what's behind there. But one thing I tried to do too is look at school enrollment over the last 10 years. I just thought this was, I don't know why it's showing up so weird. Oh yeah, it's not showing up very well at all. So what this looked at, it looked very good up there. I looked at school enrollment from 2009 to 2018. And there are only 5 counties over 10 years that saw growth in student enrollment. And to me, I've always said that student enrollment is if you care about economic growth, and I'm sort of agnostic about it, if that's your goal, like are we growing as a state, this is your best metric by far. Better than income growth, better than GDP growth, better than almost anything. This tells me that families are moving into a place and more kids are enrolling in the schools. And can you guys guess what some of these 5 counties are?
Up there, yeah.
They're all here.
You got them up there.
Yeah, so yeah, sorry, I couldn't tell, but so 94% of this growth of 4,371 was in Jefferson, Berkeley, and Mon County. And the other counties, one was Putnam, and the only reason Putnam County's enrollment's grown is because people are leaving Kanawha County to live in Putnam County. And these were very modest, the other ones. But that's pretty wild. So when we talk about is West Virginia's economy booming, where is it happening? The school data is pretty clear. It's Mon County, it's where we're standing today, Jefferson and Berkeley. Those are the only areas of human growth. Now the other areas that are booming, like Doddridge, and those are gas booming places that have mostly out-of-state workers that are there, and they're gone. We're going to talk about that a little later, but once they leave, what's left? Not much. There's a pipeline, there's a fracking pad, and money going, the thing. There's very little in the wake of that growth. So, just looking at the long picture, so I feel like this presentation was sort of under the precipice that West Virginia economy is doing well. We hear politicians talk about that, whether they're Democrat or Republican or independent or whatever. We try to come in and say, well, let's actually look at the data, and that's what we're doing tonight. Let's try to figure that out. So when we look since the Great Recession started in December 2007, we look to today. So that's, almost 12 years ago. When we look at that, West Virginia's way down here. We look at the job growth. So this is job growth over the last 12 years, basically, since the beginning of the Great Recession. We've grown by less than 1%. So when you look over the last 12 years, West Virginia's under, there's only 2 other states doing worse than us since the Great Recession. Economists generally, when you look at job growth, you want to start at when the recession started and at the end of recession stopped in June of 2009, technically. But just looking over that whole period, West Virginia's barely recovered just from that recession. So we almost have the same amount of jobs as we did 12 years ago. Just think about that for a minute. And where did all that growth go? It'd be better if it was more optimistic about where that growth was. Did it go into professional services? Is there a high-tech industry? Is manufacturing coming back? Now, those are the things like, wow, we are doing better. And that's true to some extent, but not a lot. So when we look at the counties that have seen the largest job growth from 2007 to 2018, Mon County is number 1. There's Berkeley, manufacturing, we know that. Health. Harrison County, wrapped up in the gas industry as well. Pipeline. This is all because of 1 year, and we'll talk about that. Jackson County. Marshall County, gas. Big, 2 huge billion-dollar processing facilities. Putnam, manufacturing. Toyota expanded in Putnam County, which is good. Jefferson, health. Mostly all of the growth in Jefferson County, where we are, has been in health. This is looking over the last, roughly 11 years. Mineral County, health. Lewis, gas. Taylor, gas and coal. And Barber County, gas. And these are the only counties that saw growth in the entire state over that period. That's it. The rest of them are negative. So back to the school enrollment thing. Mon, Berkeley, Jefferson, they're all there. But when we look at these other places and how they're growing, a lot of it's temporary. Okay? And when we look at our state unemployment rate today, it is very low comparatively, and it has been in decades. But it's 4.7% compared to the national, which is 3.7. So we have one of the highest unemployment rates in the country, right? This is July 2019. So back to the West Virginia boom times. Well, not compared to other states, but we are West Virginia, so take that into consideration. But when you look at West Virginia, like where has all the job growth been? When we look at it, it becomes really, really clear where it's been. I'm sorry these aren't showing up as well. But when we look, so this looks at employment growth from back in 2007 all the way to 2019. Okay? And this is employment right here. Okay? That's the household survey. And then below that is non-farm employment, your payroll employment. So that's the one we tend to look at. This one is a household survey. We can talk about that later. But this one, this blue one right here, is employment. So you can see we're above where we were, except for this little period here. We're pretty much above where we were. Okay? Now, if I look at our employment and say, hey, let's take construction out of there. Because all this pipeline construction that's happening, all this gas, all of the, maybe some of the road bond construction, we know that's going to end in a couple of years, right? We take construction out, bam, we end up down here, where we've been above a lot before. So we're look at that. We're barely growing. If you take out construction, we're barely growing, especially over the last 2 years. Look at the difference right here and right there. Big bump, going up, looking good. Take out construction, now looking good. And the problem with that is it's going to end, and it's ending right now. So when we look at West Virginia, this is the last 2 years, July 2017 to July 2019, total employment growth, 22,900. This is right before we sort of bottomed out, okay? There's our non-farm, payroll employment. Construction is 16,500 of that total. That's where all the growth has been. And guess you get down here, government and health services, education and health services. This is all mostly healthcare, mostly because we expanded Medicaid and we have an aging population. Right there. Manufacturing has gone up a little bit, 1,200. This is 2 years, mind you not. Logging, mining, not too much. And these government's actually gone down 3,000 jobs.
Ted, would you rather wait for questions at the end?
Whatever you guys want to do.
Okay.
Yeah, if you have a question, please shoot out.
And don't forget to repeat it.
I'll repeat it.
Film.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'm wondering, if the people who are working in these industries like fracking, and I'm from Wood County originally.
Yep.
If any of you all know, Wood County's been like fracked to death, and it's right next to Doddridge. Are the people who are coming in from all over the place, are they in this count of people employed? The people, I see, license plates from Texas, and are they in your statistics of people who are employed?
That is a fabulous question.
Of course.
I'm glad you asked. So the question is, when you look at the employment data, are we counting people who are from Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, that might be living in a man camp, might be staying at a hotel for a year? Are they counted in this data? And that is an excellent question. One of the data beefs that I've had lately with the Chamber of Commerce, they keep using this yellow number. They put out a press release and said, look, woo, employment's way up, higher than it's been in a long time. And what happens is there's two surveys. You want me to get wonky really quick? One survey is called the household survey. It's called the current population survey. And they call about 72,000 houses across the country, okay? And they ask you all kinds of questions. I've never been called, but apparently it happens. And they ask you, are you employed? How long have you been employed? Or if you're not employed, are you looking for work? If you say yes to that question, you're in the labor force.
Right.
If you say no, you're out, okay? Or you can say I'm retired, then you're out of the labor force, or whatever. They ask a series of those questions, okay? They have a model they use to try to figure out, because the survey is so small, 72,000 across the country, that's like 400 people surveyed in West Virginia, right? When I do the numbers, I think that's about right, about 400 people. That's not a very good survey, okay? So what they have to do is use a model. And they look at unemployment insurance claims. Like who's filing unemployment insurance or who's paid into unemployment. Here's what I think. I think they look at that and are like, okay, all these gas people are paying into that. They're paying our state unemployment insurance, right? And they're getting confused that those are households because they're using that in a model. And I think that's why this is higher at this point.
But if they're literally calling households, would they even get to those people?
Yeah, that is one part of the survey. So they do the survey, the 72,000. They have a model they use, an econometric model that takes into account all of this information. Okay, it's a model. Okay, it's not perfect. It's actually kind of, frankly, it's crappy.
Right.
Because you can't look at 1 month. You have to look at a whole year with that data because there's just not enough of it. And when they do a benchmarking process in March, and when they do that, it can move the numbers by 10 or 15,000. And like everything I'm saying tonight's wrong. Because they'll move it, and you're like, look at it, and like, boom, you don't know it. There is data, it's called the quarterly census of wages and employment that we've been looking at. We'll look at a little bit more. That data is payroll data that is paid into unemployment insurance, and it's 100% correct. I mean, it's a census. It's not a model. A lot of these others are models. Now, this one down here, see, this is called Current Employment Statistics Survey. And it's a survey of 160,000 instead of 72, 160, and it's not a model. Okay, so they probably survey, 1,000 people in West Virginia. It's not too bad. So it's a heck of a lot more accurate. And that's why that is below that, I think. Because they are picking up all of these, because this survey, and I'm talking, this is a household survey, when I was just talking about, then there's a business survey, it's called the establishment survey, and that's that current employment statistics. That's called our non-farm payroll employment. They survey businesses, because if I survey you, you might work in DC. You might have 3 jobs. So on this survey, you can say, I have 3, I'm working 3 jobs, and they don't care. You're just counted as employed, 1, employed. This survey counts multiple jobs. How many businesses employ people in West Virginia? This one says, are you employed? They ask an individual. This one asks a business. There are 2 different surveys. Economists use this one. They don't use, Chamber of Commerce has been using that one, but this is the one you use. That's the one everybody uses. And it fluctuates, so we want to look at data more concretely if we can. So to answer your question, do we count those people? The answer is yes and no. The answer is ultimately yes. If you look at the quarterly census of wages and employment, they are counted in there, and that is the most accurate data, but it has like almost a year lag in it. So if you want to know what's been going on the last couple months, then tell us anything. Because we only have first quarter of 2019 is out. It doesn't look good, but we'll talk about that a little bit. That's a great question. And that's part of our conundrum here, because if most of this, close to 70% of the, or depends on which one you use, this one, is being driven by construction, then the question is, what's driving construction? What are we doing? Absolutely. But what's fun is to actually have the data and show it. And, because I think sometimes we say things, I'm always like, well, let's look at the data. So, this blue bar looks like construction employment. Look at that. Boom, boom, boom. Now back down. This is the first quarter of 2018. So January, February, March of 2018. This is January, February, March of 2019. This is the latest data we have. Okay, this is winter, so it's going to go down a little bit regardless. But look at that. That's our construction employment. Only about 3,000 more than we had there, a little less. Okay. Now let's look at oil and gas pipeline and related structures. 4,000 jobs in pipelines, 8,000, 14,000, 12, down to 5. Okay. Now if we take out oil and gas pipeline structures, that's the yellow one here. We took out, this is construction without pipelines. 26,144, 27. It's only a gain of 1,000. So you can tell, looking at this chart, what's driving construction? Almost 100% pipeline construction. And the biggest pipeline, guess what? It just happened a couple months ago. It's over. The Mountain Express line that goes through Jackson County and several, it's gone. Almost a $2 billion, or I think it would end up being a $3 billion investment. Okay, it's supposed to have 9,000 jobs. That was the projection from the company. Okay, it's over. So this whole little revenue growth we've been having, like, oh, woo, it's been driving it. And those are questions that we've been asking for a long time. So when people are touting how great our economy is, let's see what happens when these pipelines are over. Let's see what happens when that happens. And one good case study is look at Jackson County. Remember we saw Jackson County was growing? So let's look at private employment in Jackson County. When you do that, there's private employment right there. Okay, it's exactly where it is. If you go from year to year, it's not grown at all. Okay, now why'd that happen? There's construction, is that green one. Wow, construction, look. Construction went from less than 1,000 to over 6,000 in Jackson County. How can construction employment grow 6,000 people almost? It's the pipeline. And the pipeline is now gone. Okay?
Why is the pipeline gone?
It's not gone, it's online, it's
Oh,
done.
it's completed.
Yeah,
Okay,
the big
gotcha,
one. There's
gotcha.
a couple that are stopped, but the big one, the $2 billion, actually ended up being $3 billion, it's online. Okay? And Jackson County, because all those 8,000 workers were working on that pipeline in Jackson County, and now it's over, now they're gone. See? That's the utility system construction, which is basically pipelines. So it's over. So in the green, which is construction, that's pipelines basically. And that went down, and that went down, that went down. So now Jackson County is almost exactly where it was a year ago. After, just shows you the boom of the construction and the pipeline. So we know that that's exactly what's been driving construction growth. It has been the pipeline. And the question I think we want to ask tonight, just to skip a beat, is like, where will growth be in the future? Like, where are we going to see it? And the future is almost, as Yogi Berra said, the future is impossible. There's no facts about the future, right? But the only good news I can tell you is that the Bureau of Labor Statistics does project employment for West Virginia and all states to 2026, and they try to project out what new occupations will be in the state. And it doesn't look very good for West Virginia based on the projections. And this was before the gas boom. I think the gas boom is going to continue to climb myself, but we'll see. But I did a presentation up here, 2010. I think it was in Martinsburg. I did a whole presentation on coal declining, and like everybody believed it. So I always say, like, I feel like Cassandra sometimes. You say no one cares, but it's just, everybody kind of knew, and it's like, we just use government data, but it's controversial to say that in West Virginia, right? Coal's declining. This was way before, So, where will growth be in the future? So, they are projecting about a growth of 82,000 job openings from 2016 to 2026, okay? The bad part is when we looked and analyzed them, over 82,000 job openings, 65% of those job earnings were in jobs that don't pay a self-sufficient wage. So a wage where you don't have to be on public assistance, like you don't have to have childcare assistance, nothing, absolutely zero wrong with any of these things, but a living wage, a wage that you can live on. 65% of the occupations were in those positions. And only 35% were where workers were earning a self-sufficient wage. So when I say that, what am I talking about? 36,513. You may think that's a lot of money. That's all I'm using. So how many of these jobs are going to pay less than that? 65%. And 35% will pay more.
Do you have any idea whether that 35% are people who work out of state?
No, I don't. These are based, back to a different survey, these are based on occupations. And they don't give us a map of where they are. Like I said, a lot of this you got to take with a grain of salt, because these are people trying to make, they're basically looking at our aging population, our demographics, and other things to come up with those. But they're trying to understand like what occupations will grow. They don't, I believe they don't look at what states they'll be in. And some of these I just looked at, these are the top ones right here. So all these yellow ones pay below a sufficiency standard wage for a family of 3. And the blue ones pay above. And these are the biggest ones. So the biggest job openings are food and prep workers, cashiers, retail salespersons, office clerks, personnel care aides, waiters, waitresses, laborers in freight, stock, material movers, customer service representatives, okay? All those, look at that, $19,000 a year, $24,000 a year. Okay, registered nurses, that was one of the better ones. Almost 1,500 job openings by 2026, pays $59,000. Okay, there's janitors, they make $22,000. Heavy truck and truck drivers, just barely above that, $37,000. Then we look at general operating managers, about 1,126, 72, but those are it. And the top ones, only 3 of them paid more of a living wage. So when you're asking tonight, like, what's our economic future? Well, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics in Workforce West Virginia, that puts the stuff, this is what they're saying. These are our top growth industries. And we looked at them all. So the good news is we can do something about this. This doesn't have to be our future. And we can do something to help all of these workers. That's what we'll talk a little bit about too. But just one thing I wanted to show briefly too is just so people understand that, the way, we've talked about our problems, right? Low wages, poor health, all these issues. The best way to deal with those is do something about them, right? How do we do something about wages? How do we do something about health? Because what this chart looks at is median hourly wage. There's West Virginia, okay, about $17 an hour. That's a typical hourly wage in West Virginia, okay? This looks at the share of workforce with a bachelor's degree. There's West Virginia at the very bottom, right? Less than 25%, okay? And our wages are pretty low, all these other states. And if you look at the correlation, linear relationship between the two, states that have a higher degree of people with bachelor's degree, guess what they have? More money, all right? Okay, like if you looked at West Virginia, you'd be like, that's something we ought to do about, right? How do we, over the last 8 years, we've done the opposite. We've cut higher education. So we're funding it less today than we were 8 years ago. So why would you do that? If this is one of our number one issues, okay? The thing too is if you go back to 1979, West Virginia was an outlier in a different way. We had above average wages. Look at that. If you adjust for inflation, it was above $18. Okay? West Virginia was an outlier. And that's because we had a lot of coal mining jobs, manufacturing jobs, and it's a heavily unionized industry. Okay, and there's a much smaller relationship between education and wages because we had a very industrialized workforce at the time. But today, we have a very different economy where there's a wage premium. Unfortunately, too, we're actually seeing people's college degrees, their wages go down as well. But they're still making substantially more than people with just a high school degree. So, those are some of our biggest challenges in West Virginia. Low wages, poor health, low educational attainment, and a lack of economic diversity. I actually don't think you'll get anybody like disagree with that, right? I mean, you might get somebody that says we need to have less taxes or something. But we can talk about, I can talk about that all day too. Don't want to do that though. But anyway, well, let's deal with these issues. And these are all things we can do at the state level. One thing we could do that's fairly easy is raise the minimum wage, right? Look at all these states that have higher minimum wages. We actually, that's one of the good things we did a while back. We raised our minimum wage to $8.75. The federal minimum wage is $7.25, okay? But other states are raising them much, much higher. So if we raised our minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2024, 244,000 workers would be impacted. Wages would grow by almost $1 billion. The average wage increase would be $3,900. Good news is we reduce poverty and public assistance. We boost consumer spending. People have more to spend. Little thing that people don't, a lot of people don't get sometimes is rich people save their money. Like, more money I make, more vacations I go on, and I don't spend that in West Virginia, okay? Or I buy luxury items, or I put more money into my 401k. Low-income people spend every drop of it because they have to. So if you want to boost the economy, you give it to the people that spend it, not the people that save it. That doesn't help, giving it to Wall Street doesn't help West Virginia. And especially when people care more about the grocery market in West Virginia than the stock market. But it also, when you can raise wages, you boost consumer spending, it saves labor costs all the time. People a lot of small business owners get pretty scared. Well, if I raise wages, I have to increase prices, it's going to hurt my business, I can't do it. A little secret too, you pay people more, you have less turnover. Turnover can cost anywhere from 7 to 40% of what you're paying for your employees. It's very expensive when you have high turnover. So it also boosts productivity. Pay people more, they're more productive, they do better. They care more about their job, they feel vested in it. Also, Maryland they'll be raising their wage to $15 an hour, so people are probably going to start, I wouldn't probably see a lot of people working in Maryland soon, especially low-income people, because they can go work there and make more. So that's definitely one issue. They can make 10-10 already. So also little negative impact on employment. And that's usually a big issue, especially with economists and others, that it's going to kill jobs, that kind of thing. Let me tell you the research, for a long time in the 80s and early 90s, sort of a big debate, there's good research on both sides that was really well done, but these days the research mostly reflects the opinion that it has little to no impact on employment. Okay, that's where the majority of the strongest research is done today. Shows that. It goes back to the feedback loop. There's more money in the economy too. You also have other positive aspects of that. And some of the studies that show, like the CBO did a study when the Congress, the House, had a $15 minimum wage, and they showed that it's going to reduce employment by X. And what they were actually looking at the same time they say it's going to reduce poverty, but what they're actually looking at is reduced work hours. So and that's what they're looking at. They're actually looking at jobs, looking at hours of work. So if we reduce hours of work but make more money, who doesn't like that? Who doesn't think that's a good trade? I'll take more money, less hours, any day. So that's basically what they're looking at when they're saying that it's going to have a negative impact on employment. It's definitely better done at the federal level, but being at the state level encourages the feds to do that as well. There's been some really good studies out of Seattle. One that just came out about New York's very high minimum wage, its impact. Restaurants, not much. So anyway, something very easy. Another thing we can do is create a state earned income tax credit. So about 29 states in the country have one, and what it does is it gives people basically below twice the poverty rate. It gives them a refund. It's based on the federal EITC. So when you file your taxes and you get a certain percentage back. And if you're low income, you have children, about over 90% of this goes to families with children. So if we did that, if we just did a 15% EITC, it'd go to about 162,000 children in West Virginia. So for about $47 million, you can give everybody about $332. And when we talk about this group of people these are low-income, working poor people. If So you're gonna spend every dollar here, but also this margin of benefit matters so much, like whether you can get your son a pair of shoes for school. I mean, this is who we're talking about. And this is, when people are poor, the issues of scarring and trauma lead to all these horrible things. So that's what I'm trying to say. You go back to that compensation chart I showed you, I'm telling you, look at all the research and the data. The reason these indicators are bad, opioid crisis, look at the root cause of all of this is economic deprivation. It's trauma. Trauma leads to people going to prison. Trauma leads to alcohol abuse, drug abuse, all this trauma. Guess who has more trauma? People that are poor.
Yeah.
High income people have it too, but it's different. You're more likely to have what are called ACEs, or you guys familiar with those? But still, that's the root cause. And when you're working harder hours, barely getting by, you're more likely to see domestic abuse, you name it. So that's what we want to deal with, is how do we get more money in the pockets of especially low working people in West Virginia. And this is a direct way to do it. It's a no-brainer. It means it'll never happen, but anyway. One thing states are doing too is passing paid family medical leave. We're the only industrialized country in the entire world that doesn't have it. My cousin, she lives in California, she had a baby, she got about 70% of her wages for 12 weeks. You don't get that. And, if you go to Sweden, you get 480 days. Just think about that. But let's just go for 12 weeks. There was a bill introduced that we helped introduce in West Virginia this year to do that. This is the great, most family-friendly policy you can imagine. If you have to care for your mother or a loved one, a partner, or you're having children, adopting a kid, to be able to take 3 months off, to be able to deal with that, and to bond. Just think of all of this, back to trauma, back to all of his experiences, and it costs very little. It's about $3 per week per worker. It's not very much, right? It's an insurance system, that's all it is. Just like unemployment insurance. Pay into it, you take it when you do. So this is something very easy we could do in West Virginia. Other states have already, there's actually some other states to add on here since this has been in place. This is just a great policy. God, it's no brainer, but it also leads to much better out. One of the main reasons our labor force participation rate is so low is this is a way to keep people attached to the workforce too. Because when you take off too long, or you have to go back, or sometimes you look at a job like, well, there's no point, I'll just quit, right? Because I'm having a baby, I'm done. And that's not good usually for the long-term earning potential of that person. But if they can take 3 months off, and get part of their wages, and go back to work, that improves labor force participation. Back to that main problem, right? People talk about doing it, but very few people actually want to address that problem. This is a direct way to do it. Paid sick days, another one. Talked about all these low-wage jobs, that's the future. States across the country and jurisdictions, even in Texas, in Austin, Texas, they passed a paid sick days. Now this is different than paid family leave. The sick day is like, I'm going to take off an hour, I'll work at the restaurant downtown, cafe, I have to take off an hour to go pick up my son, he's sick at school, so I need to take him to Dr. Janie, and I'm going to be back in 2 hours. A lot of people who work at Applebee's, they don't have that choice. There's no, if you leave, you're fired. That's what happens in a lot of places. This is a way to protect that. This is back to the compensation thing. This is a way to give people compensation too. But it's also a way to help your workers. Aren't they better off if you allow them to take paid sick days? Isn't everybody better off? There's an old thing like no boogers in my burger, right? You like to go to a cafe and someone's sick, serving you food? That happens a lot because there's no paid sick days. They can't take off. If they take off, some of them get fired. There's no paid sick days, so you show up sick, and then everybody else gets sick. These are huge issues, but states across the country are addressing it. New Jersey did, they passed it statewide, so did Massachusetts, but different cities have done it as well. Frankly, if Shepherdstown wanted to do it, they could do it. Shepherdstown could pass paid sick days, they could do an ordinance. So could Martinsburg. Now, I'm not going to lie, the Restaurant Association in the state will probably sue. But that's okay. They're going to do that anyway. But because, the Supreme Court's not as friendly, but I think you could make a really good case to do it, and that it's just same as smoking bans and indoor smoking bans. It's a health issue. And I think it's within, according to our research, it's within there. So when we look at West Virginia, 254,000 lack paid sick days. I just want to say too that the emphasis of all these policies, they disproportionately help women. And that's the whole, I mean, that's, when you look at minimum wage, all of these things, these folks tend to be disproportionately female that are in these low wage occupation jobs. Childcare is another one. Just to give you an idea, if you're at 150% of the poverty level, so you make about $2,000 a month, you can pay about 9.5% of your income in childcare. You go up a little bit of income, $500-600, you're paying 28%. I paid about $20,000 last year in childcare. I have 2 little kids, added it up. This is something that's back to the no-brainer. You really want to help people get in the workforce, make childcare easier, make it less expensive. Other states are doing a little bit better job than West Virginia. And if you could do that, this is something that even the Chamber of Commerce agrees with. So if you can stimulate economic growth by back to labor force participation. When you look at the academic studies, what is the #1 policy to get people into the workforce? Childcare comes up. I know so many people are not doing it. Can't, you know, they just can't afford it. Or they don't have a relative. That's one of our issues. Nobody watch our kids at home. But anyway, this is a great thing for business too. It's a great thing. That's why a lot of them support it. So for about $68 million in West Virginia, you could basically have universal child care. Not a bad deal. These are all things that we can do to make a lot of these problems less. This is just a last thing. This is just looking at, there's a researcher out of in Michigan that's probably the leading economic development expert in the country, Ted Boettner. And he's looked at like the earning effects of different costs of different things. So local earnings of different things, just a return on investment. And he was looking at universal pre-K, community college workforce education, public school spending increases, child care for poor, birth to 4. He's just looking at what you get for every dollar you spend, what's your return. See what's down there? Business tax incentives. For every dollar we spend, we get 56 cents back. You know, but look up here, universal pre-K. You get $5.72 over the lifetime of that. Public school increases, $5. This is way down at the bottom. This is what we lead with. Should not be what we lead with. Businesses need to make money, but they need to have an educated workforce, a healthy workforce. And guess where we rank last? On those 2 things, right? So the best thing, they don't need a tax cut. They need a worker to show up and to be healthy and you know, to have the skills that they need. And I'm telling you, you're not going to get entrepreneurs and all these things or businesses when you don't have basics, like a really world-class education system, basic infrastructure, and these things. But when we're looking at these different ideas, and this is, you know, Tim's he's way more conservative than I am in a lot of ways, but when he looked at all of these things, this is how he rated them, in terms of that return on investment. So, other things that we can be doing for healthcare, right? We can expand Medicaid to cover vision and dental. So Medicaid covers almost 1 in 3 people in West Virginia. A little bit, actually it's almost, yeah. It's getting close to half. Vision and dental, something that we could do. Should be an easy lift. So people that are on Medicaid to include vision and dental. It's so weird in this country that we don't include that in healthcare. Another thing other states are doing, New Mexico and Washington State are doing a Medicaid buy-in. So Medicaid, you can get in the expansion up to 138% of poverty level. Then after that, you have to go to the exchange. And when that happens, a lot of people don't get health care because it's still too expensive. So what states have said is like, well, let's have a buy-in, at least a transition. You know, so someone can purchase Medicaid on our West Virginia health exchange. It's sort of a state public option. Nevada passed it, but their governor vetoed it. But to me, like, that's a really cool thing to do. If, you know, keep waiting on the feds to act on this. If the state wanted to, they could offer a Medicaid buy-in and it'd be much cheaper than what's on the exchange. people could just buy into Medicaid. But that's going to take a little work to do that. Another thing that the House actually came very close to passing, that had bipartisan support, is import drugs from Canada. Don't have to talk about all of that all night long, but we all know how much we pay for insulin and all of these different things. But importing drugs would save us hundreds of, depends on where we do it, how we do it. Maryland now has a board that they just put together to lower prescription drug costs. They've already done transparency in Maryland, and now they have a board together that's going to probably start buying, saying like, in Maryland, we're not paying any more than this for insulin. We're not just like other places. So we can do stuff like that. And surprise billings, another one that's a huge issue. We have an IDD waiver, a development waiver for people with development disabilities. There's a wait list. We can get rid of that. It would actually cost too much money to do that, about $20 million. So that would be something, and that gets a really big federal match too. Back to helping families, a lot of families, the kids with autism and severe autism that are having a lot of difficulty. Like this was a huge, they're on a waiting list. And that's a big issue in the disabilities community. But one of the things that we've worked on for a long time is creating a permanent natural resource fund, a trust fund. So all of these different states have these huge trust funds they have from mineral resources. I spent like 3 years working on this. We passed it, but they said politics got in the way. I'll tell you that over a couple of years how that happened. But West Virginia, they passed it but didn't fund it. So when we look at Alaska, their permanent fund that they have has $64 billion in it. Okay, and they pay out a dividend, right? We all know familiar with that. Texas, how the hell do they not have an income tax? Well, one of the reasons is they have $22 billion in a fund to fund their university system. Okay, they use the revenue, the interest off that money and that trust to pay for part of the University of Texas system. Wyoming's another state. They have about $8 billion in a fund. New Mexico, when this big boom happened in North Dakota, they started a fund. They have about $6 billion. Okay, other states have these things, and the reason they do is because once it's mined, it's gone. It's over. It's over. It's done. It's a non-renewable natural resource. It's depleting. Go ahead.
Is that at the federal level the same thing as the land and water conservation fund at the federal level?
No, that's not. These are
the same
state-run permanent mineral trust funds. This is not similar to anything at the federal level.
Okay.
But interesting, you asked the question too. Like one thing I always try to bring up in West Virginia, like let's take Wyoming, right? They have $8 billion in their fund. Okay, they tax their resources much more than we do. They don't have an income tax or a corporate income tax. I'm not advocating to get rid of those, but I'm just saying like that's one of the things that they do. They also, since it's all on federal land, they also get a federal mineral mining share of that as well. And they actually have a school fund too that has several $1 billion in it. It's not even listed up here. And they extract anywhere from 20 to 25% of the value of the minerals extracted. In West Virginia, it's less than 10%. See what I mean? It's all privately owned in West Virginia through leases, through companies. I mean, the one thing out west that was much better, if West Virginia would have made sure all the minerals were public instead of private, we'd be a whole different state right now. Whole different. Very different, I would imagine, because you have a lot more sway over what happens when you own it. There's a lot of corruption. I mean, it'd be better. I'm not sure. It'd be 100%. But that's one of the reasons this has happened out west a lot more, is that the federal government or the state government owns the land. They own the mineral rights. But the states were smart enough to say, wait a minute, these huge booms happen and it's not going to last forever, so we better put some of the money away and use the interest from the money to fund things if we want to. Sort of like a happy day fund instead of a rainy day fund. It's a way to diversify your economy, right? It's a way to have something when it's all over. Think of if McDowell County would have put just 1% of the severance tax into a fund. It'd be different. And I just ran the numbers when we first started talking about this. We proposed just a 1% severance tax. Okay, back in we started this in 2012, and I just ran the numbers. I'm like, if we just had a 1% severance tax on gas, where would that trust fund be right now? It'd be about $818 million, and we would have been able to spend about, close to $50 million over the last 2 years on whatever we wanted to. childcare, infrastructure, broadband. Could have done grants to start businesses all over the state. A whole host of things. But this is, right when we introduced this idea, this is where it'd be. This is where we, just, it doesn't take into account some things, but just on the basic return of a pension fund, this is where we'd be. We'd have at least $1 billion, close to $1 billion in a fund, something to show for it. And that's the problem with natural resource extraction. There's a great quote by Ron Eller, who wrote some really good books on Appalachia. He said, in West Virginia, we've had growth, but we haven't had development. And that is so crucial to understand the difference between those two. Because when you go in parts of West Virginia, we've had growth. Like, Daughters County's booming, right? No development, but it's booming. Is there development there? Are they diversifying their economy? Are there new libraries getting built? Go to Wetzel County. Over almost close to $3 billion of gas has come out of Wetzel County. Go talk. We actually did a case study and actually went back up there last summer. Go interview people. Like, how are things? This gas boom is supposed to lead to the land of milk and honey. What happened? It's not, right?
Yep.
It's very predictable that it wasn't. It's very predictable. It's a very capital-intensive industry, and when they're going to stick their straw in the ground and get what they want and get the hell out. And that's in their best interest to do so. Because how are we going to go around here developing this place? I mean, the question you can always ask is, look at Pittsburgh. Look at all the money in Pittsburgh. Consol Stadium. They took more coal out of West Virginia than any other coal company. There's not even a foundation in West Virginia from coal. We don't have a foundation. Or somebody that's benevolent, the Benedict Foundation's the biggest foundation. They're oil and gas. That's peanuts to coal. Peanuts. Just if you think about it, there's no philanthropic, there's nothing here. They built beautiful universities across the country. Rockefellers, other people, beautiful. From money here, we did not keep it here. Raising the severance tax, putting it into a fund, keeps the money here. And that's why states have done that. So we had a question?
Well, no, I was just going to say,
Yeah.
instead, we cut the severance tax.
Yes, we just did. That was very, happy to talk about that. We worked hard on that, and we're not very convincing. They said it was going to cost between $200,000 and $600,000 a job, and people still voted for it. Back to the research plus politics. It's very difficult to watch those things happen. Do you see what was down in the last 2 months since we cut the tax? Oh, suddenly severance tax. We don't have as much severance tax revenue. But just to give you an idea, just really quick, we cut taxes, got rid of the food tax, got rid of the business franchise tax, cut the corporate income tax, did a couple of other little things. Altogether, over the last decade, we've cut taxes by over $500 million a year, okay? But just to give you an idea of what we could do with that, let's say we were all allowed to make the decisions in West Virginia for a day. If we wanted to pay for everybody's in-state college tuition, everybody in West Virginia, and they could use, except for the, if we wanted to use, except for the Promise Scholarship, and except for the grants, if we got rid of the grants and wanted to pay for everybody, it'd be about $207 million. Free tuition, would be the only state in the entire country with free tuition for everybody. New York has one, like 150. This is not, what's funny is people are like, this is a radical idea. I'm like, that's funny. I have an aunt that went to UCLA, she paid $0. It's not radical. This is how universities actually used to be. A lot of, especially California. But God, back to that issue. Who is bottom of the list? And what have we seen over the last couple years in West Virginia? As we've raised tuition, we have fewer in-state people in college. That was actually, if you go back to the beginning of the presentation, college enrollment is down several thousand in West Virginia, in-state. In-state college enrollment is down, okay? You raise the price, economics 101, people look at it and be like, well, can't do it now. Especially since we have such a terrible economy, I think people just jump into it at all. But $207 million. And they would have their Pell Grants. This isn't even, if you do last dollar, like to include the Pell Grants, it's a little over $100 million. But if you let everybody keep the Pell, they use their Pell Grants to cover their tuition, you give them the rest. It's sort of like a grant. If you just gave everybody a grant based on what the tuition was. Free tuition. that would, oh my gosh, I can't imagine how many people would be like, I want to raise my kids in West Virginia, they have free tuition, you can go to W, Marshall, Shepherd for free. And if I have a Pell Grant, I can use that money for my room and board. Or if I have a scholarship, I can use that for my room and board, which is almost as more than tuition. Some view it's about a little higher.
You do realize that all the CTCs are now free.
They are free if you take a drug test and you agree to that if you go through that
And
procedure.
you also realize
Yeah.
that the number of students graduating high school has decreased across the country, and that also affects this.
Across the country. The number of people
Yes.
graduating high school has decreased across the country.
Because the population has decreased, yes.
In the United States,
Yes,
the population has decreased.
that
I
is
did not know
correct.
that.
You're kidding.
That the United States population has decreased.
I didn't say that. I said the high school graduation.
Oh.
The students, the number of students has decreased because we've been having less children.
Yeah, okay. I don't understand why would that make this bad?
I didn't say it was bad. I'm saying that you're talking about the residents' enrollment going down, and that's directly affected by the number of high school graduates.
Yeah.
That is more effective than what the cost of the tuition and fees is.
Well, those also should be growing at the same, they should be growing every year though. Do you not agree that we should have more people in college per the ones percentage the college going rate's also going down in West Virginia too. So, see what I mean? The college going rate, the share of people that are graduating high school going to
This year,
college.
because the community colleges
Yeah.
are free, their enrollment is up.
Yeah, that proves my point. If you get rid of tuition, what happens? People go. So
And
how are they
since
going
they're-
if there's less of them, why are they going then?
And since there are less
See what I mean?
students,
Yeah.
then that has had a double effect on the four-year colleges.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Even if it's declining, right? So this can also mean more adults could go to college too, not just high school graduates. That's one of the big problems with the Promise Scholarship is it wasn't available to people outside of people that recently graduated. But prove my point exactly. You lower tuition and get rid of it, guess what? More people go, even with high school graduation rates declining. Or not, yeah, I'm not sure about that. I have to look at that national data. Anyway, one pretty good way to do that. But anyway, those are just some of the policies. I mean, there's so many that we could look at. Just to give you one startling policy, or just one thing too, is like if we, based on the tax cuts that we passed, we got rid of the food tax, we got rid of this corporate income, we lowered the corporate income tax from 9 to 6.5, we got rid of the business franchise tax. If you wanted to get rid of child poverty in West Virginia for families, you could get rid of it for about $457 million. You could lift everybody above the federal poverty line if you did that. So just think of these priorities. We're talking about, like, are we going to do this or that? The coal severance tax, somebody brought that up, right? $64 million a year. That's what that is. Think of what you could do with $64 million. Back to the college thing. Well, you can almost do half the college thing, right? I mean, think of the things that you can do with that. And those are the choices we make up there every single day. I mean, every time that they go into session. They also passed a coal severance tax credit for new coal mines that come into play. I have a feeling that's going to be anywhere from 20 to 50 million. It's all another story. But fiscal note is very good. But yeah, when you look at those things, if we want to address those central problems in West Virginia, which are, where do we rank the worst? Wages, health, education. What are we doing about that? We're spending less, especially on college education. Even with, that only cost $7 million, the 2-year. That's only like 12 million, I think. The drug test aspect of it felt pretty bad, but anyway, those things can all be addressed if those are the things that we want to put our emphasis on. Does anybody else have any questions? That's kind of it.
Would you address, there's been a lot of discussion about the cliff effect with adjustments in what people are paid and the fact that they then lose child care benefits
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
Medicaid, et cetera. Would you address that issue?
Yeah, that could be a really, so she was asking about the
repeat.
cliff effect. So when certain people make more money, it almost acts like a marginal tax. Is it actually disincentivizes people to make money? I've actually remember a colleague of mine saying at one point, well, actually I don't raise my pay because I have my kids on CHIP, and if you do that, then I'll be moved out of the category. And the real easy answer to that is get rid of it to begin with. Back to the childcare I just showed you, like, get rid of it. Make sure nobody's paying more than, I mean, the recommendations on that chart, the recommendation, I think from the CDC was that, not the CDC, but CMS, that nobody should be paying like above 8% of their income in childcare. And that's hugely idealistic, but that's saying what they said. Other countries don't do this. Back to, if you go to the other industrialized countries, especially in Northern Europe, they're not doing these types of things. Getting rid of that, I just said, it was about 68 million. That was my projection if we wanted to make childcare basically, you know, for those next couple of groups up to 400% of the poverty level, you know, about 9%. We could do it for about 68 million, about what the coal severance tax. That actually would have a big impact, I think, on employment and have positive economic effects. Other things, I mean, there's CHIP is another one. Back to that Medicaid buy-in option, that's another good approach. You know, we really need a federal answer on the healthcare things. Those are the big ones. I mean, SNAP, one of the good things that DHHR did with SNAP was move the categorical eligibility from 130% to 200, help deal with that cliff. So that was really good. It's called transitional benefits. So that was really good that DHHR did that. At the same time, they were kicking other people. Anyway, it's a long story. That was a really good thing that West Virginia did recently. Some of the other programs, you could do that as well, but you have to have, you know, be able to get rid of it.
So
But
the
it's a
reality
serious
is,
issue.
though, you can't really say raise the minimum wage to $15 without making accommodation for those benefits that would otherwise be lost.
Yeah, it depends what you make that minimum wage. You did 15, and I think you're at a living wage at that point. You're not going to have those cliff problems as much. Depends on how many people.
31,000, you can't pay a lot of child care and insurance and et cetera, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends back on who's in the family, what's going on. That person would also, you know, if they're making that much, it depends on what the ITC, it depends on a whole host of factors as well too. That's a good point though. Yeah, when you make more money, you lose some access to this public assistance things like child care and those things. The best thing we can do, like right now, like we have universal child care for 4-year-olds, which is not universal because my kid's in it right now and they don't have it on Fridays. Anyway, I'll tell you all about that. And plus there's no daycare afterwards, so it's a whole, so we have to hire a babysitter to pick my kid up. He's in universal child care. That's one of the best things that we can do back to the child care. Is just like make it truly universal, take it down to 3-year-olds. I'm telling you, like just having my kid at Piedmont in universal child care saves me, you know, equivalent of about $8,000 a year. So that's one way to do that too.
One of the things the League of Women Voters does is have meetings with our legislators. So what would you say coming up in the next legislative session? Can you foresee any bills or that might be coming up that we should pay special attention to in terms of building the prosperity of the state?
I mean, I think on the positive stuff, I think Chairman Schott of the Judiciary Committee, I believe he's really interested in, some other people are really interested in more criminal justice reform. We had some really good legislation passed this year that removed there's a ban on people to receive SNAP if they've ever had a drug felony. Just a drug felony, no other felony, just that one. They lifted that, which is great, especially people that are in recovery programs, you know, these types of things. That was a great thing that they did. We were only one of 3 states that had it at the time. Also a second chance, so people who can get their record expunged after a couple of years, help them get into the workforce. I think they're going to take another look at that. I think hopefully they'll look at like fair chance employment, where you're applying for a job and you don't have to say whether you've had a felony recently. At least you can get through one stage of that process without doing that. That's something that's passed, and I think more than half of states have it. Georgia passed it. several other states. So criminal justice reform, I see as some positive things that are gonna happen. I think there's gonna be they haven't really tackled tax reform. We've played a big role in trying to stop them from, they tried to eliminate our income tax, which is about 45% of our budget. Right here, for your delegates here, not here, but close. Yeah, I mean, that was just, that's wild. I'm like, why? Why would you do, I mean, it would do nothing but give huge tax cuts to the rich. It would do nothing for lower income people. Depends on how you did it. But if you raise sales taxes to pay for an income tax cut, you're raising taxes on a majority of people. Just always remember that. If you raise sales taxes to pay for income tax cut, in this environment, with people in power, you're raising taxes on a majority of people. So that is going to be something. The business machinery, equipment, and inventory tax, another thing that we're going to be looking at. I think they're going to be looking at education reform again to do more. Education savings accounts was another thing that we played a big role in trying to educate people about. If you guys are familiar with those, they're kind of like vouchers that you can use. It is an election season. Would be surprised to see a lot more social issues up there too. Social issues always seem to percolate when it's election season. I'm not sure if that's campus carry. I'm not sure if some of those type of things.
Oh, please.
I don't think that's over either. Campus carry is definitely not over. But some of the, tax reform, I think, one of the bigger things.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
Bonnie?
Yes, I'd like to know, presumably you present this information to interested legislators. So are there legislators who are interested in thinking in the bigger picture?
Yeah, you have one here. Sandy, who's the Sandy?
Sandy
Yeah,
Brown.
she has
Brown.
been on a lot of these bills. Some bills to do a lot of these things. She was on the paid family leave bill, I think. Yeah, it's definitely there. But I mean, the big thing that's not happening in West Virginia that's very disappointing to me is that other states are really moving fast forward and moving in a direction to help working families. We're not. And a lot of times when you look at the agenda of the Democrats in West Virginia, it's basically gambling and marijuana legalization, and that just sucks. I mean, I'm actually for it, fine, make it legal. I don't care for it. But my whole point is I think it's actually best on the criminal justice side of things more than the revenue. But you gotta lead with policies that are going to impact people's lives. If people are like, why don't people vote? You're concerned about. I'm more concerned about the majority of people that don't vote at all in West Virginia.
Exactly.
You ask them, they say the same thing. The people are controlling the system. We can't get ahead, and I have not seen my life improve over the last 40 years. I just showed you the chart. I mean, people's lives aren't improving. What are we going to do to make people's lives better and use government to do that? Those are policies. Paid family leave. When you do that, who do I thank for that? Who did that for me? I mean, there's a reason you in West Virginia had FDR on all over people's houses. I mean, they did something. It was very substantial. Charleston, the Canal Boulevard, every bridge in Charleston, Canal State Fort. I mean, that was done through the New Deal. I mean, people realized it. And when you give people health care, and I mean, not give them, but when you do that, people respond to it. And people are thankful for it. They remember who did it. But if you haven't done anything substantial like that in a long time, it's hard.
Got a question from Bonnie?
Don't we also need to do something to attract more, better, higher paying jobs?
Absolutely.
And so what do you suggest for that?
Well, but let's look at what.
Be sure to repeat the question.
Yeah. So how do we attract better paying jobs and businesses? Maybe.
Tuition.
I mean, that's one. I mean, there's labor demand and supply, right? We can work on the supply side, get people educated, have a better workforce. That's one of the main reasons people don't come here. Why would you? Go to southern West Virginia. The workforce isn't there to do a lot of things.
Oh, I see. So you think.
So that's one area. But look at what county has the best employment growth in West Virginia? Vaughn County, right? WVU. Why WVU? The huge health sciences center, an educated workforce, manufacturing stuff. Go to the areas of this country that are doing well. You see universities. You see research and development. You see spin-offs from that research and development. That means investment in universities. That means, one thing Governor Manchin did a while back was this Bucks for Brains thing. where we put about, I think it was about $50 million into a fund to help attract people, professors and other innovators to come to WVU and to help pay for that at Morgan. It was a great idea. Kentucky did it. We only funded it, they spent it all in 2 years. But that was one thing that I think they did that was fairly decent. Like, I mean, I think university-led growth is amazing. And those are good paying jobs that put money into the local economy. But a lot of these places, like, you know, we're always, in West Virginia, everybody wants to be saved by someone from the outside. It's just never gonna happen. We chase smokestacks constantly. And if we just spent a third of the time actually like cultivating small businesses, helping them out. Because their big issues are payroll. How do I run payroll? How do I pay workers' comp? How do I do, I mean, not work, yeah, workers' comp. How do I do those things? They need wraparound services. They need help. You know, but we're usually chasing smokestacks.
How about subsidizing or encouraging renewable energy? We have wind,
Yeah.
we have water, we have solar.
Yeah, I always laugh at that huge wind farm right there in Sharpsburg. It's like, it shows a draw, like that would never happen in West Virginia. But I mean, there's I think Petersburg High School, actually, I was talking to my friend John, I guess they put an installation in there. Yeah, the policy's very clear on that. Most of the states that have seen all this acceleration in renewable energy have a renewable energy portfolio. We had an alternative in renewable energy portfolio, but it was taken away in 2015 in the legislature, right? When the Republicans took over, they took it away. That's the way you encourage that. That's one way to do that. Back to the Future Fund. If we took money and said, hey, we're going to get grants out to high schools so they can increase energy efficiency in their high schools to make upgrades. Guess what that does? It saves money over the long run. See what I mean? Like the road bond, you said you guys had something. If I was governor, I would have been like, let's spend some hundreds of millions of dollars on energy efficiency. Because when we pay that road bond back, it'll be a lot easier because those schools will pay less for electricity when we get to that point. And that's what a lot of, I mean, there's definite things that we could be doing in that regard, but a lot of the industries, the coal and gas, won't let that happen. I mean, that's part of the issue too.
Well, just real quick, I've heard of a huge, budget surplus at the state level in West Virginia, like, 36 million. Is that some kind of a pipe dream or a horrible rumor, or, what is that all about? I've heard of that.
Yeah, so the question was about the budget surpluses. So
Yeah.
the last year, so our fiscal year ends June 30th, okay? Then our year begins July 1st. So from last July till December, we had significant surpluses. You remember that? Let's just use Jackson County as the, sort of talk a little bit about this, right? Now, we had huge surpluses beginning right here. 2018, third quarter, fourth quarter, okay? And then when 2019 started, we stopped having this big, massive surplus. They got smaller. You know, the main reason they got smaller is oil and gas pipeline construction went from 14,012 down to 5. That was the main driver for those surpluses. Okay, and it's temporary construction employment. And that was what was happening. Right now, we're in a deficit. I think it's about 50, I don't want to quote the number, but it's above $30 million. We're below estimates right now for the first 2 months. So right now we're not in a surplus, we're in a negative based on what our estimates, what we thought we were going to come in with revenue and what we have. Part of it's the severance tax that we talked about. We cut the coal severance tax on steam coal. And prices have gone down on gas. And I should do the thing, gas prices are going down. When prices go down on gas, we get less severance tax revenue, even if they're producing, as much as they're producing, but it goes down. So that is hitting our state right now. And that temporary construction work, I mean, the governor said it there, he's like, this work's drying up, this pipeline. We've been saying this for 6 months, but it doesn't matter, Sandra again. But that's what's happening, and that's temporary employment. Like I said, if we see manufacturing really growing, we see professional services growing, then we can get really excited. Like, wow, things are beginning to really boom for us. We're gonna see like more of these anchor institutions. Like when Toyota expanded, like that is like the definition of like positive thing to happen, you know. But right now, it's a lot of temporary gas, you know. When that completely falls out, just want to see where we are. But yeah, we're negative right now, the last 2 months.
Well, on that cheery note,
I'm sorry.
I'd like
It's not all
to thank you.
Like I said, Thank you guys.
Thank you so much, and come back.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
The League of Women Voters.
The League of Women Voters, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And remember, you'll be able to watch this again. Where will we post it on the website?